Hi, I'm Mike Wilde and I'm a final year computer games design student at Staffordshire University, and this is my reflective submission video for my advanced modelling in the games engine module. The level I've been working on since last semester is a redesign of the London Ruins map from Tekken 2, which originally was a desert style map with the remains of Big Ben coming out of the ground. I wanted to give this map a more modern, post-disaster sort of feel, and I felt this map would give me plenty of creative scope and let me make an environment with a complex architectural piece in the centre, which is the kind of thing I really feel I make best and enjoy making the most. Okay, so first I'll talk you through the design for the centre stage. The centre stage here is a small room designed to look like an office near the top of a large building. When I was designing the map, the main idea I had was to set the stage high up in a building block or an office so you could really look over the ruins of modern London, and I felt this would be the best way to incorporate the Big Ben centrepiece, which is the most important part of the scene and the project for me. The room was designed to be quite dark and relatively simple because I wanted it to fit the visual style of the level that I was going for, but not pull focus from the centrepiece. As you can see, we have several desks and chairs and drawers and the like scattered around the sides of the room. The middle has been kept clear because it's a fighting game in the style of Tekken, and this is where most of the action is going to happen, so putting obstacles in the way would be a terrible idea. The room has been lit quite dimly with yellow and red lights in the side to make sure there's some lighting in the side areas, but they've been kept yellow and red to complement the orange sky and the fog volume, and they're quite dark, again, so as to not pull focus or make it look like there's light with no visual source. Apart from this, a white spotlight has been added to the centre stage, which is simply done to draw focus to the middle of the fighting stage where the action would take place in a Tekken game. Okay, now I'm going to explain the hero piece, which here is a representation of the Big Ben clock tower in London. This has been a focal point for me throughout the entire module, because I prefer to construct environment models and I have a thing for making architectural pieces, and I really wanted to do something involving hard surface modelling in 3ds Max because I feel that's where I'm strongest. So I felt that a piece like this really gives me a chance to show off what I can do best as a modeler and help me improve in the areas relevant to this where I'm lacking a little bit. I've made several adjustments to this piece since the last part of this module. It still looks pretty much the same. There have been a couple faces removed, it's been retopologized further. Most of the back faces have been taken off to cut the tri-count down to about 50,000-ish if you incorporate both pieces. The model's been split into two halves because UDK has a size restriction on imported models, so it needed to be done in order to get it into the engine. The model also now has a texture atlas as opposed to just a standard unwrap and texture, which I suppose wasn't entirely necessary just for one piece, but it gave me a chance to experiment a little bit with texture atlasing, and it gave me a little bit more freedom to change the unwrap and where the textures go and tweak everything a little bit more to add some finer detail. I feel that some pieces have been lost in this new texture map, but for the most part it's come out quite nicely and it's helped a lot reorganizing the unwraps. This model also has a specular and a normal map, which I'll talk more about shortly when I go into material setups, and I've applied some grungy decals, which you also saw in the previous room, to really keep it fitting with the visual style and make it look like something bad has happened around the model. This piece has also been lit individually using more point lights of a similar colour to the ones in the room. They've been a little brighter again to pull focus specifically onto this model. Okay, so finally in the scene we have some basic sets of buildings across the background. They're based on similar meshes from Unreal Tournament 3, which just look like clumps of buildings put together with a small pavement. I spent a while trying to work out how to put the background of the scene together, and I messed around with individual buildings in ZBrush and everything was giving me too many polys and taking up too much time, and it looked ugly, and this seemed like the best option for rounding off the back of the scene. I feel like I could have changed the model slightly here and there. For instance, there's a large skyscraper with a pointed top in the middle, which I designed the piece to be duplicated out and rotated around to look like different things whilst just having one mesh. But in the end, that sort of really detracted from the modularity of it and made it look like an individual piece. But apart from that, it worked better than anything else I was trying, and it adds quite nicely to the background. Additionally, here you can see a smoke particle effect, which I constructed and added in a few places to add a little more animation to the scene. I intended to do this last semester because I thought it would give a nice effect, and I think it really pulls the backdrop of the scene and the scene itself together and fits quite well. The buildings across the back aren't lit specifically. There's a skylight and a dominant directional light in the scene to light every model, but they don't have any individual lighting sets, so there was no need to draw any attention to the back of the scene. One thing I did do here and there, I turned off the accept lighting option on some of the building properties towards the back because they just come through as black silhouettes, and if they're behind the rest of the building messages, it adds a little more depth to the scene, and it works quite nicely with the fog volume, which attempted to do this itself anyway. Okay, so here you can see my content browser. I'm just going to quickly explain all of the materials and textures and everything, and give a quick overview before I go into more detail. First off, I should point out the 01 default material was imported with the rest of my scene assets, and is referencing objects in UDK, so cannot be deleted. That's not actually part of my scene, but that's simply there. The Big Ben material and the scene asset materials I will go into detail with very shortly alongside the smoke material, and you can also see my decal materials here. Okay, so now I'm going to talk you through the materials that I've used in the scene. The first one is the atlas for the hero piece, which is using a diffuse, a specular, and a normal texture. The diffuse for this was created using a mixture of the diffuse map and the specular map, which is here being used as a cavity map to really emphasize the grooves in the diffuse texture. The two are being combined using a linear interpolation modifier. The first channel contains just the diffuse texture, and the second channel is using a multiply node which mixes the diffuse with the specular, and the alpha channel is another multiply node, but this time multiplying the specular by itself. As you can see, it's not an especially complex material, but having tried a few other shader combinations and ideas based around actual stone shaders used by other people, I found this really just gave the best effect in my scene and fit most with what I was trying to achieve. The specular map here is quite simply two speculars added together to emphasize the lighter areas and the darker areas, and the normal map is simply just the normal map plugged into the normal slot. I didn't feel anything else needed to be done other than that. Okay, so here we have the scene assets material, which is my other texture atlas used for every other object in my scenario. The passes here are pretty much set up the same as in the Big Ben model, except the diffuse channel, because here the lerp node is being multiplied by the diffuse texture before it's actually plugged into the channel slot. I felt this made the final material colours deeper and the material quite a bit darker, which really helped outline the visual style I was going for and emphasise the hero piece a bit more. There's a second version of this material which uses an alternate normal map, used specifically on the pillars that outline the central stage and fallen across the front. This is because I wanted to do a little ZBrush work, so I made these pillars in ZBrush, and because of that I had to use a projected normal map rather than the same normal as every other scene asset, so I created a second material pass using the same diffuse and specular, but this time the projected normal was in the map channel. Alright, so the final material I've got in this scene is for the smoke particle effect, which I put together using the RGB and alpha channels from the skybox texture. I used this because I had a lot of large materials and things in the scene already, and I didn't want to bring in any more. So I thought I'd try and be conservative and make something using my existing textures. First off, I used a constant 4 vector in the emissive slot of this channel to define the colour of the smoke. I set it to a sort of off-white because that seemed to work quite well with everything, and I set the blend mode to translucent to make sure there was a little bit of opacity straight off. Okay, so for the opacity, first I multiplied the blue and green channels of this texture together, and then I added in a second skybox texture with a rotator into the UV's channel, which created a flickering effect which seemed to work quite well for the smoke. The red channel of this was then multiplied by the blue and green from the previous thing, and the result of this was multiplied by a constant vector with value 0.2. The result of all of that was plugged into the opacity channel in the map slot, and this was applied to a basic particle system, which I just adjusted the size, velocity, and lifespan for to fit the scene.